I'm Chris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review, speaking with Matt Murschel from the Orlando Sentinel. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, doing well. Can't complain. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. Is it hot and humid there too, like it is here isn't here in Houston?
Yeah, it is. It is actually. I went outside just a little while ago, and it's sunny and hot and humid, and it's only going to get worse as we get through the going through the summer. So, but it's I guess there could be worse things that could be happening weather-wise for us.
Yeah. I mean, summertime is not even officially here, but it already feels like it in some places. So, okay. You cover UCF among other Florida sports, and with UCF joining the Big 12 like University of Houston on July 1st, I wanted to get in touch with you and talk with you. So, what is this is kind of a silly question first off, but what's the vibe around UCF campus about joining the Big 12 as it approaches?
No, I think the vibe is excitement. I mean, this has been going on since the announcement came out. I think it was it last September. When the schools and that accepted the invitation from the Big 12 when it first came down. This has been something that UCF fans have been eager to have happen for quite some time. In fact, I think if you remember back in 2013 when the Big 12 was really kind of talking about expansion and looking at some other schools, UCF was really one of those schools that had put together a package, a formal interview process, and said, "Listen, here we go. We're interested in joining that conference." At the time, the Big 12 decided that wasn't the direction it was going to go, wasn't going to add any schools. It's disappointing for a lot of the UCF fans here, but they felt like, listen, we have enough to kind of show that we're a showcase type school. We're someone that you can bring a lot of potential to the Big 12. And then, of course, 2017, 2018 happened. Obviously UCF goes undefeated. They get to they beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. They claim a national championship. Just lots of things just kind of went through it. And that really kind of boosted that up. So then when the Big 12 comes around this time and they're interested and they take them, you see the fans being really just, overjoyed with this idea of, listen, not only is it going to help provide us more coverage, help give us, a bigger brand, get our brand out there and a more national audience, but it's also going to provide us a financial hit, which is really going to help us out as well and really kind of help us prove that we belong in a big Power Five conference. So I think that's where UCF fans kind of mentality is going into the summer.
And recently you had an article about the American Athletic Conference payouts to member schools. How do you get the information first? And then, if you can, define the, I guess, breakdown of payouts in a general scale. UCF was, what was it, like 8.8 million, I think?
Yeah, yeah. Normally, what happens is each school, has to turn in it's a tax form and then a 990 tax form. And what I usually do is every year, I've done this, I think, for the last 10 years. I reach out to the conference and I ask for as a public records request to get the tax form, and so they send it to me. And in that tax form, it tells you a lot of stuff. It gives you it talks about what the NCAA the grant money that the school, which is basically the revenue that the school is each school is sent, talks about how much money the conference makes, total revenue, total expenses, breaks down, what the conference commissioner makes. And then, you get into things like how much money do they get from their media rights deal? How much money do they get from conference championships? And each conference is different how they report it. So it may not look just the same, similar when you put them side by side. And that's where then I look at the schools and and you can kind of break down what's going on. It's usually, I think people tend to get a little, the thing to remember is it's the fiscal year, the last fiscal year. So it's not from this past year of football or whatever. It's from the year before that. When you look at it that way. So sometimes that gets fans confused and they kind of like, well, listen, we went to the Peach Bowl. Why didn't we make this amount of money?
Right.
It's like, well, that's because it was a year before. So, and this time around, UCF went out and got a $8.8 million. They weren't the top among the AAC schools. Cincinnati was that because Cincinnati obviously was in the New Year's Six bowl game the year before that. So they got a big bump from that, which I think was a little over $11 million. There were about 3 or 4 schools that were in the $8 million range. Obviously, that number is a lot higher than it's been in the last 3 or 4 years because of the new, American Athletic Conference media rights deal, $1 billion deal. That they 12-year $1 billion deal. That money went up. Plus, you got to throw in the fact that there's different bowl games and NCAA tournament shares, and that kind of all goes into play. So that's where this all kind of comes out. Navy gets a share. Obviously, it's not nearly as much as the other schools because they don't do basketball. And Wichita State gets a share, but theirs is basically all sports except for football because they don't do football. So it's a little less as well. So It's I think it was around $93 million that was ended up being distributed from the conference to the schools.
I got asked this question from some alums, UH alums. It wasn't a huge difference, but why was East Carolina's revenue just a little bit higher than Houston's?
Well, it could be, I know specific for each school, but it could just basically be some of it could come down to the bowl games. Some of it could come down to, the NCAA shares, basketball shares. They also get some revenue from the other sports,
Mhm.
baseball, softball, things like that. There's also some academic revenue
Okay.
that the conference is willing to give to some schools based on what their academics are. So it's never really as easy as, like each number is the same when it goes that. Some years, some schools make more than others, and it just depends on what's going on. In the past, for instance, if a school was leaving to go somewhere else, let's say UConn, for instance, was leaving the conference, their payout would have been a little bit less because they would have had the conference taking some of that money out. But this time around, that didn't happen. All three schools leaving are spreading their payments out over the next 2 years, and they're paying them out themselves, not having the money held out back. So that's basically why the money wasn't necessarily equal when you look at East Carolina and Houston. So like I said, I don't have specifics. You'd have to go to dive into
Sure.
each school and figure out maybe where that money came from.
Now, the 8.8 is a boost,
Mhm.
but it does not compare to what Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, and BYU will receive in the Big 12. What is the difference there between Big 12 payout that they'll receive, I guess, roughly the first 2 years in the Big 12 to the American?
Well, it's going to be huge. And think about this too. The first couple of years in the Big 12, all three of those AAC schools aren't going to get their full payout. They're
Right.
going to get they're going to get basically half of what they're supposed to expect. That's kind of helping pay off their to help pay off part of their entry fees, and also to help, that's the way the conference sets it up. So you're looking maybe anywhere from 18 to $20 million that first year. That's huge comparing, like you mentioned, $8.8 million. It's double that. So a lot of schools are really key on that, and they're eager to get that. Now, once that all goes through, when the new membership kind of goes through, then they'll get back up to what all the other schools are making, which would be anywhere near, I think it's 35 to $40 million, depending on what's going on. So
Mhm.
that's a big payday, and it's the reason why a lot of fans and alumni from all these schools were eager to get into the Big 12, because now that changes everything. That's game changing when you're talking about what you're trying to do, particularly when you're looking at collectives, when you're looking at facility upgrades, when you're looking at trying to help kind of get back up to speed with all your other programs, not just football. So it's a big payout, and I'm talking to a couple of athletic directors. They're eager for that opportunity now. They've got expenses they've got to pay, obviously, leaving the American and going into the Big 12. But once that's kind of worked through, eventually that money kind of comes in, and it really kind of changes your athletic department. You have to hire more staff. You have to actually kind of build a Power Five athletic department, and it's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen. But the payout is going to be there. So once they get through that first couple of years, it'll start to get back up there as well. So that's why they were eager to see, Brett Yormark come out with a really good media rights deal when he finally got one put together. And I think that they're eager to see that happen. And who knows what happens if the conference expands and they add a couple more schools, maybe that money goes up. Maybe you get a little bit more money as well. So there's an opportunity to make more there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next couple of years.
In your opinion, how close or is UCF ready for competition in the Big 12 from an athletic perspective, but also administrative?
Well, I think they're close. I mean, I think all these programs are going to have to take a big step forward in recruiting. You're talking about some of the Big 12 schools like Texas and Oklahoma. Granted, they're only going to be there a year, but even some of the other ones, Baylor, those are programs that maybe were able to sign a 5-star kid every other year, and maybe get a bunch of 4-stars. Well, some of these, the UCFs, for instance, that's kind of was their high ceiling, was a 4-star kid. So
Mhm.
now they're going to have to kind of up their recruiting process. They're going to have to try to add more talent to the field. I think early on it's going to come through the transfer portal. I think they're going to grab a lot of kids. I know Houston's done this. I know Cincinnati's done this as well. Grab a couple Power 5 kids, have them come in, help them boost their roster a little bit. They're definitely going to have to add more depth at the linebacker, or more depth at the offensive line, defensive line positions. Those are areas where guys are going to be really kind of in the trenches, and they're going to really feel it. And I think administratively, I think the school is ready to go and has the people in place now. Again, once they get there, they're going to have to figure out how to balance everything going on. Travel is going to be a lot different. It's going to be a lot harder to get from Orlando to Manhattan, Kansas. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for them as well. Also, getting their fan base to travel, that's going to be a little bit. But I think they're excited about it, and so I think the pieces are there. I think facility wise, there's some things they'd like to upgrade. I think the stadiums needs a little bit of a spit shine here or there to kind of make things a little bit better. The basketball is being done right now. The arena is going to have a $12 million kind of a facelift put on it, to kind of help up there as well. Baseball just got done last year. Softball was done last year as well. But all these other sports, they've got to kind of make sure they get them back up to speed, because they understand that, this is the big time now. You can't look like a little podunk school. You got to go out there and find a way to make it work.
Is there any heat on, how warm is the seat for Coach Johnny Dawkins, UCF men's basketball?
Well, I think there's a little bit of it. I think because of the fact that he lost a lot of players. I mean, a lot of coaches and programs are going through this. Losing players to the transfer portal, but you're going into the Big 12, and Johnny has coached in a Power 5 league. Mm-hmm. He coached at Stanford, and he obviously was assistant coach at Duke. So he understands kind of what's going on there. So I think Johnny's going to find a way to eventually get out there and hit the recruiting trail. I think where they're going to have to really kind of up their ante is through the collective. I mean, they're really going to have to hit the transfer portal, try to get enough money in the collective to kind of help themselves out, bring in some players. I think it's going to be a rough couple of years. I could say that about pretty much football as well. I mean, I think it's going to be a rough couple of years in the beginning, just because, again, you're trying to adjust, you're trying to get everyone on the same page. It's going to be a challenge. And so they have to figure out a way to adapt to that. And I think for Johnny, he knows how to coach. It's not like he's a bad coach or anything. But will there be enough? Will they let him go 2 or 3 years if they struggle? I'm not sure. Once you're in the Big 12 and once the money starts coming in, the revenue money, then maybe you decide to make a change. But who knows? If he gets the right players in place, maybe he's had some success, and you'll see what happens.
It's interesting you mentioned football. You think they might struggle because
I don't know. About, 7 and 5, 8 and 4, that kind of thing. I think there's going to be some challenges, especially this year. And the reason I think this year is, I think people tend to forget outside the Big 12 schedule, they've got to go to Boise State, and that's a long road trip. It's something that they don't usually do a lot of those long road trips. So I think that's going to be a challenge for them. You look at some of the games they have at home. I mean, obviously Baylor's going to be around there. Oklahoma's going to be there. That's going to be a challenge for them. Kansas State is coming off a great year. That's going to be a challenge for them. They don't get TCU, they don't get Texas, so that's going to be good. They get West Virginia, they get Houston, obviously, and so I think there's going to be some challenges. And I think I know UCF fans hate to hear that, but I think they also understand that, going with the schedule and everything that's going on, that there are going to be some bumps in the road. But who knows? I mean, again, they've got a new offensive coordinator. If things kind of step up a little bit and they get a couple pieces here in the offseason through the portal, maybe they got a chance to flip that to 8-4 and or maybe 9-3, depending. But I think this is going to be a rough couple of years just as they kind of make the transition in.
But your scheduling saying UCF, saying they'll go 7-5 as a struggle, 7-5, 8-4. From a Houston Cougar perspective, UH fans would love for Dana Holgorsen to go 7-5 this first year in the Big 12. They've kind of lowered their level of expectations to like 4 or 5 wins this season. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and I think that's just UCF fans. I think UCF fans have a high expectation, but I think a lot of people have tried to temper that a little bit, saying, "Listen, this is a big jump. This isn't going from, and this is no disrespect, this isn't going from the MAC to the Conference USA. Right. I mean, this is a big jump, and you're going to have to feel this, especially on the road traveling. It's going to be a lot more challenging than you're going to see. And again, scheduling and some of the games, what times they're going to be on. I think there's some advantages to being here in Orlando. Weather, which we mentioned early on in the segment, weather in August can be, and September and October can be really muggy and humid. And we've seen a lot of teams come into the bounce house and they've been worn out because the humidity gets to them. So there are going to be some things that maybe some Big 12 teams haven't gone through before. So I think that could help them out. But again, they've lost some players to the portal. I think John Rice Plumlee at the quarterback is a huge addition for them. Obviously, he had a kind of up and down year last year, was hurt. He's come back full strength this year. I think that'll be big for them. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, to me, I'm one of those. I'm trying to be optimistic, but also want to make sure fans understand there's just going to be some bumps they're going to have to deal with.
I mean, that's part of being realistic as well. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it. Florida State, they're in the ACC. In your opinion, at some point, is there a timetable, in your opinion, that you do not see Florida State in the ACC? And if so, how far down the line is that?
Well, at this point, I mean, it comes down to that grant of rights deal. They're locked in. I mean, that
Right?
thing is through 2036, and they really don't have a way to get out of it. If they're really determined to get out, or if they can get someone else on their page with them, let's say Clemson or another school that's like, listen, we want to get out, we want to have opportunities, we could go to the SEC, let's say. Then what's going to happen is they're going to have to go through the legal route, which means they're going to have to cause a lawsuit, and that's going to take some time. That's going to take some money, and there's no guarantee you would win that lawsuit.
Right.
So if you're Florida State or Clemson or one of those schools, you're kind of stuck. You really don't have many options unless something else happens, unless the ACC, there's a huge realignment thing, and the ACC wants to go out and add some more schools, and then that grant of rights deal kind of crumbles, and then maybe they can find a way out. Until that point, what they're hoping to have happen is they're sitting down having these discussions about revenue distribution and trying to get an unequal revenue distribution where maybe they could get more. Florida State, Clemson, the power schools can get more of that money, taking it a little away from unfortunately the lower schools, and try to find a way maybe to help them out. Maybe that will make them a little happier. It's nowhere near going to put them in the same spectrum as any of the SEC schools or the Big Ten schools. I think, unfortunately, you're going to have to find a new media rights deal. And the problem for the ACC is the Big Ten and the SEC, their media rights deal comes up again before this current one ends. So they're going to get another even more money when it comes out. So that's why you're seeing the Florida State AD Michael Alford being like, listen, we got to do something because we're struggling. What they're going to have to press the ACC on is find ways to make us more money, find ways to make deals that we are bringing more revenue, that we could get to the $45-50 million mark, and maybe we can make that last for a while. Because when you're looking across the way, you're about 3 hours from Gainesville, and you're looking at Florida, and they're going to be pulling in $75-80 million a year. That's hard to watch and think, man, and that money is going to help build facilities and keep them going. And so I think Florida State at this point is going to be around in the ACC for a while, unless something major happens and they all get together and say, maybe we've got a chance to breathe this out legally.
And one last thing, Matt, have you spoken to UCF coaches or any UCF people and asked them their impressions of Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark and I guess his footprint that he's placed on the conference in this short time he's taken over?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a couple of people. I spoke to Terry Mahajer a couple of months ago. He has a good relationship with Brett Yormark. I mean, he thinks he's obviously there's a lot of a buzz surrounding him. He's a kind of the out of the box. I know that's a phrase people hate to use, is out of the box, but he's a guy who's definitely thinking, about how can we take this league to a different level, a different spot. I mean, listen, look at this past week. They talked about moving games to Mexico City and doing things outside the continental United States and maybe having XFL kind of rules in their football where you've got coaches being mic'd up, and you can do, things that would really kind of take this league into maybe a younger generation where people get excited about what's going on. So, I think the coaches like it. I think the ADs like him. I think everyone feels like he's a good fit for them. He's aggressive. He's not just sitting back. And I think as long as they can continue to do these kind of things and get good deals and make the conference move forward, I think everyone's happy. Now, what will be a big player is what happens with the Pac-12. If the Pac-12 decides to collapse and these schools leave and join the Big 12, that's even more of a pat on the back, of Brett Yormark, because that again adds more inventory, adds more games or opponents, and really expands the league itself. And I think even then, UCF fans are excited about that idea rather than having a commissioner who's trying to keep the league afloat and trying to make sure everyone's getting enough money to keep the things moving forward.
Good to see Coach Malzahn being mic'd up as a big thing. But is he all for it? You looking forward to it?
Now that would be, I don't know if he would do all for that. I'm not sure if he's a guy that would be, we've spoken to him a couple of times. He's very reserved. I don't know if he would be excited about doing that. I'm sure if they had to do it, they would do it, obviously. When you think about it, it's I think all coaches are a little bit hesitant to have themselves put out there because you never know what you're going to hear said. And I think obviously Holgerson's another one at Houston that you got to wonder what he says on the sideline and everything like that. But I think there's parts of what the XFL has done and they're talking about that can make the game exciting for fans. If you want to hear a coach talking to a quarterback, I like how in the XFL that you can hear what's going on between a offensive coordinator to his quarterback, telling him, this is what I want you to see happen. And I've had talked to quarterbacks and coaches who told me this is great. I would love to do this in college. I'd love to be able to talk to my quarterback all the time in his headlet, and tell him this is what we're doing, because they think that would help the game get even better. So I think there are things that would work really well. Now, again, the coaches being mic'd up might be something that we'll have to take a little bit getting used to, but anything to keep the league kind of looking fresh and afloat.
Thank you, Matt. I was intending to call you a few days ago, and then we talked earlier today, and I'm glad you were able to squeeze me in today. So it was a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing you at some media day function this season and future seasons. Thank you very much, Orlando Sentinel's Matt Murschel, and you take care.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Look forward to catching up with you down the road.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.